The Leafs are forced into an impossible decision following a shocking report from Elliot Friedman revealing some wild details as it pertains to Brad Treliving's trade plans, specifically regarding Fraser Minten and Easton Cowan. We're going to break that down, as well as discuss a brand new injury update that just happened as it pertains to Max Pacioretty. Stay tuned for all that in this episode, folks. Before we get into it, quick reminder, hit that subscribe button. If you are a part of the percentage who aren't subscribed to the channel, this is the place to be for daily Leafs content. Your guys' support has been absolutely unbelievable. And if you're a part of that 71%, make sure to hit that subscribe button. But ladies and gentlemen, there's a lot to go over today. We had a video earlier on Seth Jones, and now we have some new reports from Elliot Friedman that the Leafs are interesting things about their young players. But before we get into that, Darius, we have some brand new news that has dropped seconds ago as it pertains to Max Pacioretty. I'll let you cover this, and then we'll dive into some of the new reports about Fraser Minten and Easton Cowan.
Yeah, literally 30 seconds before you hit the record button, Max Pacioretty has officially been placed on the IR. So he's going to miss at least 3 games and at least 7 days. It's not LTIR, so it looks like he could return soon. But the fact that he's on IR again, we kind of knew that this was going to happen. I've said it a lot on the channel that this season, him coming in, he was probably going to deal with injuries. He probably wasn't going to play every game. But for me personally, to see him back on IR now, after not even playing in a game, he got hurt in the first practice back from the Four Nations. A little bit frustrated now with this injury stuff with Max Pacioretty, and I'm not sure if you can kind of base your plans or anything, heading into the postseason around Max Pacioretty possibly being on your third line anymore. And even when he has played heading into the Four Nations, his play has kind of dipped a little bit, at least in what he brought to the game with the physicality. So it's going to be interesting to see how long he's out, but Pacioretty back on the IR.
Yeah, not ideal. And yeah, like you mentioned, it's going to be interesting how this alters their trade plans, how it alters anything in that regard. Obviously, a man in the second, third line, a bunch of different things there. So let us know down below that draft about as we were, hitting the record button. So it's interesting, always keeping you guys up to date. But speaking of keeping you guys up to date, this report dropped yesterday, and it is from Elliot Friedman, and is revealing some very interesting things as it pertains to what their trade deadline plans will be. So you can see this here. There are 4 people/assets potential trade partners ask from Toronto: Easton Cowan, Ben Danford, Fraser Minten, and their 2026 first rounder. If you want to do anything significant, they'll have to decide which of these they'd part with. So it seems now, and this is the first time that it's been confirmed from Elliot Friedman. We kind of knew that this was going to be the case, that Fraser Minten was floated around. You'd have to assume that one of Cowan, Danford, or Minten are going to be gone by the end of this trade deadline in any trade that they're going to be looking for. So Darius, this is actually a pretty big report, because it not only signifies that A, the Leafs are somewhat going all in to a degree, but B, that Danford, Minten, I'm mainly focusing on Cowan and Minten, although Danford's also very good as well. They are definitely being shopped, because that's what other teams are asking for. And at this point, the price of everybody is extremely high.
So for reports like this to come out from Friedman and for these names to be kicked around, like you said, it means that the Leafs are all in, right? And we've kind of covered that over the last couple of days. It looks like they're looking for a guy who is going to cost at least one of these guys. And when you're looking at the list, obviously Easton Cowan, Fraser Minten, they're the most highly sought after Leafs prospects. Like if you're going to make a trade for a high-end player, it's probably one of those 2 guys. But it's interesting that not only Ben Danford has been listed, the 2026 first-round pick has been listed, which I think is interesting, because most teams, if they're trading assets, they probably want to pick this year. But nonetheless, Nikita Gurbankin has also been, thrown around in these trade rumors as well, which I think is interesting, because I really like the way he plays. He's not as, high end, I guess, and he's a little bit older than some of these other guys. But again, he's been kicked around as well. And when you look at Easton Cowan, I mean, he's having another fantastic year with the London Knights. His point streak just came to an end a couple of weeks ago. Again, having a great year, but we don't really know what he has at the NHL level besides preseason, right? Like it's still kind of up in the air in terms of, I feel like he's still has a high ceiling, but maybe the lowest floor too, right? You don't really know with this player. So it's still kind of magic beans to me. Where on the other hand, Fraser Minten, we've been talking about this a lot, and I know you're kind of the opposite mindset, Nick, and we can kind of get into it, but Fraser Minten, you do know what you have in him. You see what the potential could be, and he has played NHL games and has looked really good. Obviously, he looks a step back still, and that's why, he's been with the Marlies for the majority of the year, and they still want to develop him. But when you look at Fraser Minten, to me, it looks like he's going to be a real good center for this team in the future, and a really responsible center, which is hard to find at times. You can find guys who can score goals, right, on the open market, but a guy like this, I think, would be a good centerpiece, not a first line center, second line center, anything like that, but a really good responsible center that can help you in the playoffs in the future. So I think I'm more likely leaning towards, if it's a high end guy, trading Easton Cowan. But Nick, I'm curious about your thoughts too. And Ben Danford, I think, is absolutely on the table, because, he might only be a second pairing guy in the NHL.
Yeah, 21 points with the Oshawa Generals this season. Still has some upside. Easton Cowan, In the OHL, 45 points. I think he, like you mentioned, I think they're probably rather trade Easton Cowan to a degree now. I'm starting to lean in that direction a little bit. And obviously, Minton in his first AHL season has put up 13 points in 24 games, which is obviously a step up from the WHL. And of course, he's played in the NHL as well. I do think other teams would also probably value Easton Cowan a bit more. If you're going to kind of be going for prospects slash wild cards, I'd assume take the guy who has the higher upside and the lower floor as it pertains to that. But it's very interesting. And I mean, the problem is, though, I'm fine trading Easton Cowan, Fraser Minton if it's for a guy like we've been discussing, Mikko Rantanen and Dylan Cousins. But if these names are being floated in deals for Scott Laughton, even the Shens, Luke
Yeah.
Shen is reportedly, we'll have videos on that coming out. Like there's a lot high ask there, Braden Shen. That's where it starts to get a little bit dicey. And I'd rather, if we're doing deals for that, include a guy like Nikita Grabenkin plus a pick of some sort rather than your kind of chip prospects there. And again, if they want to make a significant move, they'll need to determine which of those they're willing to part with. And I think internally, that's the big question is who are they willing to part with here? And some other updates as well. They're weighing should they trade for Braden Shen, like we covered in a video in the past. They're pursuing some other players, Luke Hames, which we discussed as well. But it is very interesting. I mean, the Braden Shen talks are starting to heat up a little bit, especially as it pertains to the Leafs, which I know, Darius, you're probably not too fond about. That'll be interesting with his $6.5 million, I believe it is, cap hit. Like things are really starting to pick up, and there's also Mikko Rantanen buzz. But as it pertains to these players, I'm fine with it if you're getting a first liner guaranteed back, or even like a second liner because the Leafs' first line is stacked.
I think that's exactly it, right? Like if you're going to trade one of Easton Cowan or Fraser Minton, which again, I would not trade Fraser Minton, but if you're going to do it, it's got to be somebody that would make sense in a trade where you're like, oh man, Fraser Minton has a lot of upside and he'd be great in the future, but man, we're getting a actual second line center right now that's going to be a second line center for the next couple of years. Not Braden Shen in that way. I do think Braden Shen could help this team, but he makes a lot of money if the asking price is what it is, and we're going to have another video on this as well. That's a bit steep. It is really steep for a player like Braden Shen. I don't know if he helps the team that much. So it's going to be interesting to see what Brad Treliving ends up doing. But if they're trading one of these two guys, it's got to be worthwhile. There's no way you can trade one of these two guys for a Scott Laughton. Like I might be open to trading Ben Danford or Nikita Gerbankin for a guy who can immediately help you like Scott Laughton. That could make some sense to me, right? But a top end prospect or one of your top prospects in return for a guy who's probably a third line center and has one more year of term doesn't really make sense for me, right? Like it may be a second round pick for Scott Laughton or something like that. So in a normal year, but again, the market this year is crazy. So I think if they're going to trade one of these two guys, it's got to be worthwhile. It has to be an all-in move. It has to be like a Mikko Rantanen or something like that. I don't know if Braden Shen or Scott Laughton get it done for me. But if they have other prospects that would get it done, like a Danford, like Gerbankin, there's a couple others. Like Holinka, I wouldn't move off of either yet. I think that he has tremendous upside as well. But, maybe not as much as like a Fraser Minton, let's say, that we've already seen in the NHL. So it's going to be interesting to see what Brad Treliving has up his sleeve in about a week's time.
Yeah, not much rumblings about Dennis Hill to be either, so they're probably trying to keep him, even though they have a bit of a logjam at goaltending, at least for the foreseeable future. But let us know down below what your thoughts are. A bunch of new reports are dropping. We keep you up to date with all the latest news, so make sure to hit the subscribe button. See you guys later.